Chairwoman, thank you for holding a hearing on this important topic, and Chief Welter, welcome. Noted with interest your background in the House on the Appropriations Committee, then the White House on the budget, and then that obviously gave you a good background for all of this. Some of this gets pretty specific, to say the least. My statement says voluntary conservation programs are talked about in coffee shops all across Kansas, not only as a way to protect valuable land and water resources, but also for the ability of farmers and ranchers to continue operating. That's why you mentioned that you are the shield to protect producers from regulations that exceed the cost-benefit yardstick. There is, however, a palpable fear, particularly in western part of my state, that the Federal Government is already too close to mandating how cattlemen raise livestock, how and where farmers can plant crops, whether or not they will be allowed to pass their family businesses to the next generation. One of the perceived threats is the listing of the lesser prairie chicken as a threatened species, which you've, I think, mentioned. Many Kansans, including myself, believe that the listing decision was unwarranted, especially during a tough drought when voluntary conservation efforts were already underway to increase population of the species. That drought lasted 3 years. We're still short on rain. In February, Congress required the Department to conduct a 90-day review and an analysis on all efforts that pertain to the conservation of the bird, including the Lesser Prairie Chicken Initiative, CRP, and EQUIP. While the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Department of Interior, I know, oversees and enforces the Endangered Species Act, the Department and the NRCS have many of the tools and the voluntary programs that could and should have prevented the listing. Now, earlier this year, the Department publicly stated that the report on the effectiveness of the Lesser Prairie Chicken conservation programs would be submitted to Congress the week of May the 5th. I know you're busy down there, but that was nearly 7 months ago. The absence of the report has caused additional frustration with a lack of transparency between the public and the Federal Government. So my question is, why has the report not been submitted to the Congress? Who or what is holding it back? And when will the USDA finally release it?
So the Lesser Prairie Chicken has been a focus for our agency now for many years. We have created a landscape initiative just very much focused on Lesser Prairie Chicken, and we've tried to target our resources to help.
Well, where's the report?
The report is still in departmental clearance, I'm afraid to say, and it should be released imminently. It's been finalized by our agency, and it's
what is imminently? A couple of weeks?
Hopefully within the next week to 2 weeks.
Within the next week. Good. Well, that's good news. In a similar vein, do you have any update on the effectiveness of the NRCS-run Lesser Prairie Chicken Initiative, i.e., are populations of the bird increasing? We hear they are.
We hear anecdotally that, yes, they are. So we have had this, as I said, this initiative where we focus close to $30 million to work with ranchers and farmers to put in place practices. Those practices have treated over 1 million acres in the core area for Lesser Prairie Chicken, and we think it is having a very beneficial impact on the populations in these core areas where we've targeted the resources. So we think it's working.
Let me move to the waters of the United States that Senator Bozeman mentioned. 9 senators met with the the administrator of the EPA, Gina McCarthy, on the final day of the Congress before we adjourned. Well, we didn't adjourn, but we're back, but at any rate. And we really basically just asked her why we can't roll back these regulations. And while voluntary conservation measures are popular in Kansas to preserve and improve our water quality and availability, the EPA's proposed waters of the United States is a major concern. I just attended the annual Farm Bureau dinner, about 1,000 farmers out in Kansas. That was the #1 issue, Lesser Prairie Chicken #2. You would think it would be a lot of other things, but that's just the way it was. And I was disappointed that the Department and the NRCS were involved with the EPA's efforts through this additional interpretive rule. I want you to cooperate. I want you to communicate, more especially with Lesser Prairie Chicken, and that's good. But the interpretive rule has created confusion among the countryside, singling out 56 NRCS technical standards as qualifying for exemptions. Now, I defy any farmer, their CPA, or any farm organization to try to wade through those 56 and make sense out of it to the degree that they feel that they are doing things the right way according to the NRCS. The Clean Water Act already exempts normal farming and ranching activities from many of the permitting requirements. So basically, why did the NRCS spell out 56 exemptions when the law already has one?
So the intent was, I think, a good one. And unfortunately, I know there have been a lot of concerns raised by stakeholders here in Congress as well as among our farming and ranching stakeholders. It was a process that NRCS, sitting down with the Army Corps and EPA, identified practices, activities that may occur in the waters of the U.S. These are not upland practices. In these cases, they could be like stream crossings, actual wetland restorations themselves, where when producers have had to get permits, in some cases it's taken months or years to get a permit. Or as an agency, we have had to invest hundreds of hours of staff time trying to get a permit to do a 0.8-acre wetland restoration. So the intent was to streamline those activities that actually occur in the waters of the U.S. to not have to go through a permitting process. But that said, as been pointed out previously, a lot of stakeholders were very much concerned about both the proposed rule as well as the interpretive rule that EPA and the Army Corps promulgator produced. And I understand that EPA and the Army Corps are very carefully considering options on how to address concerns on the interpretive rule.
So that's still not been finalized with regards to the 56 as opposed to one. My question, I think, has already been answered, and I'm over time, and I apologize to my colleagues. Who wanted the clarification of the exemptions before this rule? The farmers in my state certainly weren't asking for it.
I think we've heard from our customers themselves, and a lot of this then is, I think, variability between core districts. There are some core districts that have a very strict interpretation, and there are other core districts that do not.
Right. Will you consider withdrawing the interpretive rule and any guidance already issued until the full waters of the United States rule is finalized?
I defer to EPA and Army Corps on what they ultimately want to do, but yes, that's one of the options that are being considered.
What do you think about that?
I think we need to take very close heed and pay attention to the concerns from farmers in this confusion that the interpretive rule unfortunately has created, and it, if anything, needs to be simplified so that it's a little more clear as to what the intent was and what the benefits are.
Are changes to the interpretive rule or guidance, are you considering all the comments you received? Because you've received a bunch, I know.
Yes, I know absolutely EPA and Army Corps are considering the comments they've received, over 1 million comments on the proposal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.